And welcome to The Bottom Line, where we try to get to the bottom of the main business stories of the day. Earlier this month, Mario Draghi delivered a long-awaited report with an urgent plan to rescue the European economy. We know Europe's growth is in decline. The question is, now that we know what we know, will leaders do what it takes to implement the necessary solutions? EU member states have been discussing the report, and now Ursula von der Leyen has a new team of commissioners. What will come of these proposed fixes? With me today is the outgoing EU Commissioner for Economy and former Italian Prime Minister Paolo Gentiloni. We hope to hear his thoughts about the Draghi report and his time as Commissioner. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us. So we hear that Mario Draghi's report starts with a sobering assessment that Europe needs to adopt some serious changes to keep up both with the US and with China. Do you agree with the premise of his report, and why has Europe fallen behind so badly?
Well, I agree. I think that this report is a sort of wake-up call for Europe. And I'm glad to see that the next Commission, in the ideas of Ursula von der Leyen, will take this report as an important part of its new job. Why is the challenge there for the European competitiveness? I would say three main reasons that are three pillars of our system that are a little bit trembling. First, the cheap gas from Russia, no more there. Second, the unlimited possibility to have trade with China, which is now under discussion. And third, our security provided by America. Of course, it is still provided by America, but I think we have to address it with our own forces. These three main reasons are telling us if you don't wake up, you risk to be lagging behind. And I think this is the core of Mario Draghi's intention in its report. And then there are several policies that he is proposing.
Draghi advocates a much tougher line with China, but how can this be achieved when some of the member states are rather involved in the Chinese market?
Well, you need as always in the EU, you need a balance. I think the European interest is not to decouple all our economic relations with China, but at the same time, the time of ingenuity in our trade relation with China is over. So the key word from the European Commission is de-risking, meaning that we keep our trade relation with China, but we are also concerned to have our value chains autonomous and not too dependent from China. This is a delicate balance. For example, we recently decided about tariffs on electric vehicles, and our decision was more moderate and limited in relation to the US decision, but in any case we have to react to a overproduction coming from China, which is affecting our markets.
There's an awareness that some of Draghi's proposals are novel, but some of them have been around for some time. And the question is, some of the recommendations, they have been already put forward. Why weren't they actioned sooner? Why wasn't some action taken sooner?
Well, I think in the last 5 years, a lot of action was taken.
Have we seen the fruits of it then?
Yeah, the action came because of Black Swan that we had to address. So first a pandemic, and then a war with all the consequences on inflation, energy, etc. To face these unpredictable and unprecedented events, we took bold decisions. First of all, what we call Next Generation EU, 800 billion of common money and funding. Is this something that we have to forget? It was only the reaction to the pandemic, or the possibility of common funding could be there again for different objectives, different European common goods. This is the point. The reaction to the pandemic showed that we can deliver also on something like the Eurobonds that for decades were presented as something impossible in the European Union, and it was possible.
If you were to implement one of many Draghi's proposals, right now, right here, which one would you choose?
Well, I would choose in this moment the idea of common funding for defense, because it is needed and because I think it is realistic. If you identify defense as a common good for Europeans, you will have also from countries that normally are a little bit reluctant on common funding, an attitude more available. So I would start from there, because this could be something then triggering a more broad process of investments.
Would you focus more on the R&D or more on the procurement?
Well, we need also procurement in defense. We need European procurement. What is incredible is that we are always discussing the amount of expenditure in defense. We are discussing too little on the fact that 78% of our defense expenditure goes outside the EU. So we have to buy in common and to buy European.
I was also stunned at how much we lag behind in terms of the R&D aspect.
Yes, of course. R&D is connected to another priority that Mario Draghi is addressing, which is the dimension of our capital markets. Because, you know, R&D from governments, the public level of R&D in Europe is not so low. It is completely comparable to US and Japan. What is low is the R&D from the private sectors. And why? Because the dimension of our financial market is too fragmented, too limited.
One of Draghi's solutions to Europe's many woes is this attitude of coordinated efforts in Europe. And for Eurosceptics especially, this is something that just doesn't resonate with them. It actually probably triggers them a little bit. How would you persuade the Eurosceptics in terms of Draghi's attitude to implementing that?
Well, I think one of the ways, as I said before, is to try to bring the different member states to a consensus on issues that are particularly urgent and shared. And this is why I think defense could be a good starting point. Then, of course, we know that there are some European countries very reluctant on common funding. But listen, if we have if we were able to protect our European unity, to avoid enormous differences, if we were able also to reduce the differences between Western Europe, Eastern Europe, this was because of our common funding. So I think that those that are advocating against common funding, as a matter of fact, at the end, they are advocating against the EU. So gradually we have to convince them, and a good starting point is to start where the higher level of consensus is. We have to support Ukraine, and common defense can be a very good goal for common financing.
Is common defense actually a realistic aspect, a realistic point?
It is. I think it is. I've heard practically no strong opposition to this concept. Of course, then you have to decide. And in many cases, you have to decide unanimously, which is another difficulty in our European architecture.
Harder than you would think, actually.
Very difficult. Personally, I experienced the need of unanimity on the agreement on taxation, and it was not an easy task. But at the end, we were able to decide unanimously on 800 billion. We can decide unanimously to support Ukraine with common defense procurement.
Draghi considers low productivity levels as a very important aspect, a very high priority, rather. That's what I want to emphasize. A very high priority, and something that is a major gap between the US and Europe. At the same time, it's something that gets in the way of moving forward with technology and also innovation. What would you actually consider more of a priority? Is it the innovation? Is it the technology? Is it the productivity? How do we move forward with these three things?
Well, I think, in fact, they are all connected. Something that we should remember is that if we take the tech sector out, the level of productivity in US and EU is exactly the same. So where is the point we are lagging behind is innovation, technology, and the difficulty in productivity is exactly in this sector. So we have to invest in innovation, we have to strengthen our capital markets, and through this we can try to catch up on technology, innovation, which is the domain where productivity is very low. It's not low productivity in other sectors of our industry. It is very high in US in the technology sector. It's not for coincidence that we don't have big companies in Europe born in the last 50 years. And in the US, all the big companies were born in the last 50 years. This is showing us that we need capital markets and more investment in research and development. And the two things are connected.
Of course. Paolo Gentiloni, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great to have you. And that was outgoing EU Commissioner for Economy and former Italian Prime Minister Paolo Gentiloni in our studio. Thanks so much for joining us on The Bottom Line. I was your host, Marie Cato. Join us again tomorrow at 5 p.m. CET on TVP World. For more business stories, check us out on X and on tvpworld.com.